Мне кажется порою, что солдаты с кровавых не пришедшие полей не в землю нашу полегли когда-то, а превратились в белых журавлей.
Я родился в Средней Азии.
The war came unexpectedly. When my friends and I, the Tashkent school children, were on vacation after end of the year exams, from September the 1st, we were going to study in the 10th grade. By 1941, we were all convinced of the wisdom of the peaceful foreign policy pursued by our government under the guidance of our leader, Joseph Stalin. That is why we took Germany attack as an act of unscrupulous treachery. Looking back now, I think that my Soviet patriotism, which had faded during mass repressions, including repressions against my relatives, it revived during June 1941. We were proud to take part in the defeat of Nazi Germany. We hoped for a quick overthrow of the Germans by our mighty Red Army. However, the reality proved very different. An urgent evacuation from the west of the country began. Evacuation of the people, industry and soldiers wounded in battle. Members of the Young Communist League, Komsomol, in Tashkent were mobilized to help. I was assigned to a team of physically strong young men who were sent by the district Komsomol committee to help with the transportation of goods as well as evacuated and wounded people. Thus, from the very first week of the war, we saw and felt its horrors. In May 1942, they started to draft us, the recent school graduates, into the army and send us to military schools. Many of these schools sprang up in Central Asia. It can be said that one's fate and gradually depended on the distribution list of military recruitment officers. My classmates, drafted into infantry, artillery or motor military training schools, having become sergeants in 3-4 months later, were sent to the combat zones at the front. Many of them were killed or wounded. As a result, in 1942, my generation was already replenishing the ranks of the Red Army, which had suffered huge losses at the beginning of the war. I, for my part, was sent to the Officer Candidate School of Communications. Over a year of training, that school prepared junior lieutenants ready for technical or commanding duties in the force, working on a communication equipment sent by the Allies, USA, UK, Australia and Canada, under the Lend-Lease program. Life at the military school was initially very difficult for yesterday's school children. 8 hours of theory and equipment classes and 4 hours of self-training a day, serious physical training, hand-to-hand fighting, field training and forced foot marches, deployment of communication equipment at work on equipment during field exercises. Many men could not stand this load, and I was glad that I had done boxing in high school and was physically fit. I helped other cadets a lot. In August 1943, when we were awarded the ranks of junior lieutenants and were being sent to our places of duty, I was disappointed to learn that I was to stay at the school as a practical training instructor. My attempt to evade the order and head to the front was unsuccessful. I was told that due to the new types of communication equipment being introduced into the armed forces, the school was expanding and they needed new training personnel. I was appointed as a wire communication instructor and mainly specialized in the use and repair of Soviet and American teletypewriters. I had to conduct many practical exercises with the cadets, as well as participate in the development and carrying out of field exercises on the means of communication deployment. In February 1944, I was sent to the front to gain experience in the signal communication troops. I was assigned to a separate communication regiment, which was serving in the headquarters of the 4th Air Army. At that time, an operation was being prepared for the liberation of the Crimean Peninsula. by the forces of the separate coastal army, and our air army carried out air support for that operation. When I was working in the Army Communications Center as a switching center technician, communication officer, and commander of the telegraph platoon, I got good practical experience and understanding of the operation of Army communication during the preparation and carrying out of the offensive operation. I learned that a vast network of wire communication is used to supply and control hundreds of air army facilities. Those means were mainly telegraphic. They had higher interference resistance and provided documental confirmation of the information content. While working as a communication officer, I had to quickly change the distribution of the center specialist duties for the time-critical tasks or in the event of equipment failures. It is difficult to imagine the number of military orders that were coded and transmitted through an army communication center. We worked with passion and helped each other a lot. We were happy that we seemed to have learned how to fight a war, and a great victory was in sight. In May 1944, the operation to liberate the Crimea by the 4th Ukrainian Front and separate coastal army was completed. We relocated to the town of Stary Krim, and it was time to say goodbye to new friends and returned to the communication school in the city of Kokand.
Это наш праздник, это наша победа, одна на всех. Мы ее заслужили. Да здравствует наша победа!
My instructor service at the communication school continued until 1949. All those years, I dreamt about getting higher engineering education. And in September of that year, I began my studies at the radio engineering facility of the Kharkov Higher Military Aviation School. Having graduated from this school in 1954, I served in the navigation service of the Air Army as a deputy chef of planes blind landing system at the Baltic Air Base in Tukums, Latvia. In 1958, I successfully passed the entrance exam to the postgraduate school of the Military Radio Engineering Academy in Kharkov and continued to serve there until my retirement in the rank of colonel in 1977. During my service at the academy, I defended a PhD thesis and was engaged in scientific and teaching work. I also supervised postgraduate training. During my 18 years of this service, under my supervision, up to 50 graduate theses and 2 PhD theses were defended. I also trained up to 25 military engineers for the radio technical troops of People's Democracies, the allies of the USSR. After retiring, I headed the computer center of the Institute of Cryobiology in Kharkov and developed software for biological research. I migrated to Australia in 1993. For a long time now, I have been actively involved in the work of the Russian Language Shalom Association and the Discussion Club in Melbourne for three years. In 1990s, I also worked on a contract. I developed software to determine the optimal technology for manufacturing power cables for the Melbourne plant of Oleg's cable production.
Я, конечно, понимаю.
Like many young people of my generation, at the end of the war, under the thunder of victorious salute, I felt highly patriotic about the social system of the Soviet Union. I believed that the huge losses of the army and its defeat at the beginning of the war, as well as other injustices of the system, were written off by the victory in 1945. My real understanding came gradually after painful reflection in the privacy of my own mind, since talking about that publicly, would have ruined my own life and that of my family. And of course, I was led to my current understanding of the Soviet political system by the historical work of independent researchers who appeared after Mikhail Gorbachev coming to power in the Soviet Union. Today, I am convinced that the root cause of all the failures in politics, people's misfortunes, and colossal losses of the Great Patriotic War was the unjust dictatorial regime of absolute power and the absence of any democratic checks and balances. All of that was established in as early as 1917 by the Bolshevik coup. On the eve of the war and during the war that led to the implementation of the criminally erroneous military and political decision by Joseph Stalin. Today, I think that the victory in that war calls not for ostentation's pride, but for the respectful memory of the people who died in it, and a serious reflection on the introduction of real democratic principles throughout the whole post-Soviet space.